They're going to be in trouble. We'll let them know about that. If they fly in a dangerous position, I would say that you or your captains can make the decision as to what they want to do.
And it'll happen again. Maybe it's happening right now, I don't know. But the point is, the President of the United States is going to wage war on narco-terrorist organizations.
We have tapes of them speaking. It was massive amounts of drugs coming into our country to kill a lot of people.
Aegis-class destroyers are probably the most potent air defense destroyer in the world. Any Venezuelan aircraft would get absolutely annihilated, decimated, shot out of the sky in short order. Trump 2.0 has always said that he's going to have a war on crime and a war on drugs. And this is taking what is a different approach, not a law enforcement approach, but a military approach to the drug problem. It's highly unusual. And of course, it's one of those things that you have to be really careful of, because otherwise you could get yourself entangled. Trump, we know, is someone who wants to be known for wars that end, wars that he did not get into. So I think we can absolutely go away from the notion that the US are going to do a formal invasion of Venezuela. That is not going to happen. The worst case scenario is that the narco-terrorists retaliate, and that does lead to overt action by the Americans within Venezuela itself. But I do think this will be proportionate, and it will be governed by that proportionality going after those narco targets. Now, there is no doubt that, given the fractured nature of the relationship with Venezuela, that Trump would like to see President Maduro fall. That's probably a difficult one at the moment. The really interesting thing, I think, that we've seen over the last few days is the buzzing of the American ships was actually by F-15s, which is an American aircraft. It was not by the Russian aircraft, because the majority of the Venezuelan Air Force are actually Russian. And over the last 20 years, most of the equipment which the Venezuelans have bought, because they are a revolutionary regime, has been Russian kit. And indeed, the closest ally for Russia in Latin America is Venezuela. This will be the interesting thing diplomatically, I think, because the Russians don't want to upset Trump because of Ukraine. So it's actually whether the Russians will be a lever over Venezuela to inhibit their actions as much as anything, because what they don't want to be seen is in bed too overtly with Maduro, particularly because they signed in 2025 a strategic cooperation agreement with them. Now, that can mean anything you want, in the same way that it didn't mean much when they'd signed an agreement with Iran and they didn't come charging over the hill to save Iran earlier this year. So I think there are limits to this strategic cooperation with Russia, but it's an interesting sidebar to look at for the future. Do I think that the Venezuelans will overtly try and kinetic action against American Aegis-class destroyers? No, I don't. That would be absolute folly. Do I think there's any chance of this invasion? As I said, no, I don't. And there's no overt indicators and warnings of that at the moment. If you're thinking of doing that, then you would look for where's the logistic build-up of the Americans, where's the amphibious assets, where are the airborne assets, and none of those seem to have been stood up to put overt pressure on Venezuela. It is worth saying again, though, that Russia and Venezuela's liaison together is for a particular reason. Not only does Putin want to negate the power of the US, but both Putin and Maduro are two regimes which are sanctioned, and two regimes where they both have diplomatic isolation. So they're sort of brothers in arms in the way that they're seen by most of the international community as pariah states. Putin has this long-term strategic partnership with Venezuela, but he's caught between a rock and a hard place. That is, he wants to keep President Trump on side, because his real grand strategic interest is to regain lost territory and spheres of influence in Europe. It is not to have a revolutionary regime which is going to upset that calculus in Venezuela and sour his relationship with Trump. So I think the nature of the partnership might be there on paper. It will be a paper tiger, of which will be little from Putin, because he's got bigger fish to fry. Those armies are not necessarily good armies. But the problem with those armies is the key thing that you never know in any of these things is how will they fight, how well might they fight, and for how long might they fight. Now it depends on how the Venezuelan people perceive the nature of that regime at the moment and their own sovereign position. There's an asymmetry of power. That is, if you look just at sort of the metrics of the size of the defense budget, the size of the forces which each can bring to bear, there's such a mismatch in power that Venezuela would be ridiculous from their part to have a confrontation with America.